Hello again. Globalisation is a good example of a neutral and inoffensive expression whose effects could once be discussed objectively, but is now regarded by many people as a taboo subject. Indeed, in the comments here yesterday, somebody suggested that I didn't discuss globalisation because if I did, the video was likely to be removed by YouTube. This is, of course, nonsense. As regular viewers will know, though, nothing is taboo here. In the 1980s, we started to hear talk of globalisation, meaning the way that very large companies now straddled more than one country and even sometimes more than one continent. Companies such as McDonald's or Coca-Cola are like that. It was sometimes seen in terms of the undesirable cultural influence of America. The terms Disneyfication and Coca-colonialism were coined. So in the 1980s, globalism was seen in a negative way by many left-wing people. By the turn of the century, though, more sinister meanings had become attached to the word globalisation by some, while others were embracing it wholeheartedly, particularly left-wing progressive types. Some people had said that because those big companies were dominated by Jews, allegedly, then commercial globalism was some kind of Jewish plot. At the same time, globalism was becoming seen not just in mercantile or economic terms, but in idealistic social ones as well. After all, there's only one world and we are all citizens of this world. How lovely if borders became meaningless and we began to think only in global terms rather than in nationalist ways, only about the interests of this or that little country. Globalism began to be seen as a way of sharing, so that all those starving masses could have the good things in life which we in the West have. Those two meanings of the word globalism, on the one hand as an anti-Semitic conspiracy, and on the other as an idealistic pipe dream, now coexist uneasily together, and it's not always easy to get people to distinguish between them. Characters like Georg Soros and Barbara Lerner Specter are identified with both versions of globalism, of course, and Viktor Orban of Hungary, who is fiercely opposed to immigration and determined that Hungary should remain Hungarian, has globalism in his sights in both of its current meanings. Of course, we see globalism in action all the time, except that those operating according to this doctrine or ideology seldom say so out loud. The policy of open borders in Europe is part and parcel of the idea, in that individual nation states are no longer the important constituent of the world. It is only large blocks which matter, and these blocks should grow larger and larger until they ultimately embrace the whole world. In the case of Europe, we can see firsthand in this country what the practical consequences of this kind of thinking lead to. When poorer countries in Eastern Europe were added for purely ideological reasons to the wealthy Western European founders of the European Union, the natural result is that many from Romania and Bulgaria flocked to Britain because they would then share in our wealth. One does not blame them for this, but one can certainly blame globalism for creating such an undesirable situation and making such a mindset seem attractive to so many people. The chronic lack of border controls in Europe means, of course, that as soon as an Albanian, Iraqi or Somali can get into one European country, then he can travel straight across the continent to northern France without any difficulty and take a boat to this country. That too is globalisation in practice. The language of globalism is now creeping into everyday discourse. For instance, rather than talking about black people or Asians, it's becoming common now to see references to the global majority, this being a reference to the fact that white people of European origin are a small minority of the world's population. Use of this expression carries with it the implication that because we in Europe are so much better off materially than those in Africa and Asia on the whole, then this must have been achieved by some kind of sharp practice, that Europe has in some way cheated the dark-skinned people out of what is theirs and so taken more than their fair share of the world's wealth. This is, of course, an idiotic way of looking at the situation, because without European thought and enterprise, there would be no wealth. All those useful minerals that we have exploited and caused to be mined to make our mobile telephones, computers and spaceships would still be buried deep beneath the ground in Africa, while those above were scraping a meagre living as hunter-gatherers. The fruits of civilization, which everybody now seeks to share in the name of fairness, would not exist were it not for the efforts of our European ancestors. In short, we created the modern world and present-day civilization. It's not something we stole from Africa or Asia and should therefore now be prepared to share. It's ours, not theirs. Of course, in practice, the immigration which is justified by the concept of globalism has degenerated into little more than state-sanctioned looting of people arriving in Britain and seeing how much benefit they gain. Sometimes this is done by using our education system or health service and so on, but at others it turns into something which looks very much like folk from less wealthy countries just turning up here and helping themselves to any of our stuff which is not red hot or nailed down. What is vaguely described as the rural crime wave is part of this process, as may be readily seen when you look at it in detail. I live partly in Essex, and there has been a rural crime wave, as they call it, in the farms here in Essex lately. In the description to this video, I give a link to the website of the Essex Police, and we may see the latest people behind this crime wave. Rural Essex is pretty well 100% white English, and yet who's been stealing all the farm equipment, GPS systems and so on? Who is driving up the costs for farmers, which will be passed to you, the consumer? Step forward, Ida Cessna and Gintares Jankauskas, who between them stole £380,000 worth of equipment and agricultural vehicles from 13 different farms across the county. Guess why your insurance keeps going up? This is the same across the English countryside, all over the place. And this too is a manifestation of globalism. People from poorer countries come to our country to see what they can lay their hands on. Globalism is a scourge, and the sooner we reverse the trend and restore the proper boundaries between countries, the better it will be for our country, Britain.